He had a brief romance with a humble woman and disappeared. Years later, he meets her again as a powerful CEO and mother of his daughter. The night was warm, the air thick with the scent of magnolias drifting up from the garden of the sprawling estate. Golden light spilled from the windows, mingling with the clink of glasses and the hum of laughter as the city's elite gathered for another lavish gala. James strolled through the ballroom with the ease of someone born into this world, his tailored suit hugging his lean frame, his hazel eyes glinting with a mix of charm and restlessness. He was the heir to the Harper dynasty, a family that ruled industries and reputations with equal precision. But tonight, something felt off. A hollowness gnawed at him, untouched by the expensive bourbon in his hand. Across the room, Emily poured glasses of sparkling wine, her slender fingers moving with the grace of someone who turned simple tasks into art. Her waitress uniform, though plain, couldn't dim her natural beauty. Dark blonde hair tied in a loose bun, a stray lock falling over her brow, and blue eyes that seemed to hold unspoken stories. By day, she worked at a diner in the heart of Savannah, Georgia. But at night, she took gigs like this to support her mother, Margaret, whose failing health drained every dollar Emily could scrape together. Each smile she offered the guests was a quiet fight against exhaustion, delivered with a dignity no one in the room could buy. It was a fleeting moment, a glance across the crowded room, that set fate in motion. James, bored with shallow talk of stocks and mergers, caught sight of Emily balancing a tray of flutes. She laughed softly at something a co-worker whispered, the sound cutting through the noise like a breeze. Something stirred in him, as if his heart, long dulled by duty and expectation, had heard a call. He crossed the room, ignoring the curious stares of other guests. "You look like the only person here who isn't trying to impress anyone," he said, his deep voice laced with a hint of teasing. "Before we dive into this story, I'd like to ask for your support. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Thanks, and let's keep going." Emily looked up, startled, but held her ground. "Maybe because I don't have anything to prove," she replied, her tone steady, a spark of wit in her eyes. "And you? You seem a little lost in all this glitz." He chuckled, a rare sound that night, and it warmed the air between them. Their conversation flowed as if the world had faded away. She spoke of her mother, of late nights caring for her, of the diner's greasy coffee smell clinging to her clothes. He, for the first time in years, admitted the weight of being a Harper, the pressure to be flawless, the urge to escape it all. Hours slipped by like minutes, and when the gala ended, James found her in the garden, slipping off her shoes to ease her aching feet. "Can I drive you home?" he asked, a vulnerability in his voice that clashed with the untouchable man everyone saw. Emily hesitated, her bare feet cool against the damp grass. "I'm not the kind of girl who gets into cars with strangers," she said, but a smile softened her words. "But I can give you my number. Maybe you'll show up at the diner sometime." He grinned, and under the starlit sky something bigger than both of them sealed a silent promise. In the weeks that followed, James became a regular at the diner. He sat at a corner booth pretending to read the paper, but his eyes tracked Emily's every move. She felt her pulse quicken each time he walked in, the bell above the door announcing his arrival like a song she didn't know she needed. Their meetings grew frequent, intimate. They wandered Savannah's cobblestone streets, sharing stories and laughter. One night, under the silver glow of the moon, James took her to a quiet overlook where the city's lights twinkled below. He held her hand, his warm fingers lacing through hers, and whispered promises that made her heart tremble. "I've never felt this before," he admitted, his voice rough, his gaze locked on hers. "You make everything feel possible." Emily felt heat rise to her cheeks, his scent, a blend of cedar and citrus, wrapping around her like an embrace. She wanted to believe him, to dive into that wave of hope, but a cautious voice reminded her of her roots. He was an heir. She was a girl with calloused hands. Still, when he kissed her that night, the world seemed to align. The taste of his lips, the scratch of his stubble against her skin, the distant hum of the river. It was perfect. But fate had other plans. James's family, aware of their romance, began to close in. His mother, Catherine, a woman with a steely gaze and sharp words, didn't hide her disdain. "Do you think a girl like that understands what it means to be a Harper?" she asked one evening. her tone laced with venom masked as concern. "Your future is in New York, at the company's headquarters. Not here, playing Romeo with a waitress." James tried to resist, but the pressure was relentless. Endless meetings, veiled threats to cut him off from the family fortune, and the promise of a role that would cement his legacy wore him down. He knew he had to go, but he couldn't face a goodbye. Goodbyes hurt, and he was practical, always had been. So one grey morning while Emily slept, he typed a cold message, almost cruel in its brevity. "Emily, it was great knowing you, but I have to leave. This is over. Good luck." He hit send with a heavy heart, the weight of those words like a stone in his chest. Her replies buzzed through, texts he read with stinging eyes but didn't answer. "It's better this way," he told himself as he boarded a flight to New York. "Long distance doesn't work. She'll move on." But each unanswered message was a wound he'd carry. In Savannah, Emily clutched her phone, tears streaming as she read his words. The diner's coffee smell, once comforting, now choked her. She texted back, begging for an explanation, but his silence was worse than any rejection. He'd discarded her as if their laughter, kisses, and promises meant nothing. Weeks later, a shock hit like lightning. Exhausted and nauseous, Emily took a pregnancy test. The 2 lines mocked her, a cruel reminder of what she'd lost. She considered telling James, tracking him down, but fear stopped her. What if he thought it was a trap? What if he humiliated her further? Heartbroken but resolute, she chose to go it alone. The child in her womb was hers, and she'd protect it fiercely. That night, clutching the test, Emily's tears soaked her pillow, but a sudden sound pierced the quiet. The landline rang, insistent in the dark. Who could be calling at this hour? When she answered, she heard only breathing on the other end. The silence on the line was deafening, as if the void itself had a voice. Emily held the phone with trembling hands, the pregnancy test still on the table, its 2 blue lines glowing under the dim lamp. "James?" she whispered, her voice breaking, a thread of hope tangled with dread. "Is that you?" No answer. Just slow, hesitant breathing, as if the caller wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. "James, please." She tried again, but a sharp click ended the call, leaving her heart racing and her throat tight. Who was it? Why call at this hour, in a night already heavy with pain? Emily let the phone slip from her hands, the cold plastic against her sweaty palm, and sank into her pillow, tears flowing again. But deep within, a spark of resolve flickered. She didn't need James. She didn't need anyone. The child in her belly was her anchor, her reason to keep going. The months that followed were a fragile balance of grief and hope. Emily rose before dawn, the bitter scent of coffee filling her tiny kitchen as she prepared for the day. Margaret, her mother, grew weaker, her raspy cough echoing through their small apartment, a constant reminder of time slipping away. Emily worked grueling shifts at the diner, the jingle of tip coins mixing with the hiss of the espresso machine. Every penny was saved for her mother's medicine and the costs of her pregnancy. At night, when the world stilled, Emily sat at the kitchen table, her old laptop casting a blue glow on her face. She devoured articles on investments, markets, finance. A distant cousin who worked at a credit union once mentioned that the digital world was full of possibilities. Emily, with the tenacity of someone with nothing to lose, dove in. She started small. She launched a YouTube channel sharing practical budgeting tips, speaking with the honesty of someone who knew the worth of every dollar. Her words, raw and empathetic, drew viewers. A single mom who saved on groceries, a student who cleared debt, a retiree who started investing. Grateful messages trickled in, steady and heartfelt. Emily replied to each, her heart warmed by the thought that, even in her struggle, she could help others. Over time, her channel grew, and she began selling online courses, teaching what she learned during sleepless nights. The smell of diapers and warm milk mingled with the clack of her keyboard as Charlotte, her newborn daughter, slept in a crib nearby. Charlotte. The name felt like the light Emily needed. When the baby was born on a crisp fall morning, the sky so clear it seemed painted, Emily felt her world shift. Holding her daughter, with her tiny wrinkled face and curious eyes, she vowed never to let Charlotte feel the sting of absence. "You're my everything," she whispered, the warmth of the baby against her chest easing for a moment, the ache of James. But at night, when the house was quiet, his memory crept in like a cold draft, carrying the bitter taste of rejection. Emily wondered if he'd forgotten her, if the promises made under the stars were just echoes of a moment that meant less to him. Years passed like pages turned too quickly. Charlotte grew into a girl with wavy blonde hair and blue eyes like her mother's, but with a smile that sometimes made Emily pause, her heart clenching. It was James's smile. Each giggle from Charlotte was a reminder of what could have been, but Emily refused to sink. She worked tirelessly, juggling the diner, her online courses, and a budding financial consulting business that started turning heads. A local investor, impressed by her story, invited her to speak at a business conference. Emily hesitated, the memory of her waitress apron still vivid, but she accepted. That night, in a thrifted blazer, she spoke with a conviction that drew the audience forward. The applause roared like thunder, and for the first time Emily felt the weight of who she was becoming. Success brought money. No longer about tip jars, it was contracts, partnerships, investments. Emily bought a bigger apartment with windows that let sunlight dance on hardwood floors, and moved Margaret to better care. Her mother, though frail, smiled more, her eyes bright as she played with Charlotte. Emily never forgot her roots. She donated part of her earnings to a charity for single mothers, remembering nights spent counting coins for formula. Each check she wrote was a triumph, but also a way to repay the kindness that had sustained her. Charlotte, now 5, was a whirlwind of energy. She raced through the apartment with a sketchbook, drawing butterflies and scrawling crooked words that Emily treasured. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be like you," she said one afternoon, crumbs of blueberry muffin on her cheeks, the kitchen smelling of vanilla. Emily laughed, but her chest tightened. Be like her, a woman who, despite success, still carried scars. Still, she hugged her daughter, the warmth of the moment chasing away the shadows. But not all was bright. Some nights, exhausted, Emily stared at the ceiling, wondering if she'd been right to keep Charlotte from James. What if he'd changed? What if he deserved to know? Those questions haunted her, but fear of rejection, of being seen as a gold digger, kept her silent. She kept an old photo, taken one night with James, tucked in a drawer. In it they grinned at the overlook, her hair tousled by the wind. Sometimes she looked at it, the edges worn, and felt a void no success could fill. One afternoon, reviewing spreadsheets for a new seminar, her phone rang. It vibrated against the oak table, an unknown but oddly familiar number flashing. She answered, her heart racing for no clear reason. "Hello?" she said, her voice steady but with a faint quiver. Silence. Just breathing, like that night years ago. "Who is this?" she asked, sharper now. But the silence held. Before she could press, the call dropped. Emily stared at the phone, her pulse pounding, an eerie feeling settling in. Coincidence? Or was it him, after all this time, reaching for what he'd left behind? Days passed, and the anonymous calls stopped. One morning, sunlight bathed Atlanta in golden hues, streaming through the tall windows of the convention center. The air buzzed with voices, the clink of coffee cups and the rustle of papers, as executives in sharp suits and women in sleek dresses moved in a networking dance. James stood in the crowd, a senior executive badge around his neck, his hazel eyes scanning the room with a mix of confidence and weariness. 6 years in New York had changed him, broader shoulders, premature gray in his hair, and a gaze heavy with tough choices. The Harper Enterprises headquarters had shaped him into a ruthless leader, but the emptiness he felt years ago still lingered, a shadow no success could banish. He was there to seal a deal with an American fintech firm, a move his mother, Catherine, deemed vital for global expansion. Talks of profits and acquisitions rang hollow, and the expensive colognes around him couldn't mask the nostalgia tugging at him. He thought of Emily sometimes in New York's quietest nights, when the city's skyline felt too cold. Her soft laugh, the warmth of her hand, the diner's coffee scent clinging to her, they haunted him. But he buried them under work and ambition. It was better this way, he told himself, a mantra that never fully convinced. The main hall was packed, stage lights highlighting the keynote speaker. James settled into a front row seat, more out of duty than interest. The speaker was introduced, Emily Carter, a financial expert who'd turned her rags-to-riches story into a thriving empire. The name hit him like a bolt. Emily? It couldn't be. He straightened, his heart racing, as a woman took the stage with a presence that commanded the room. She wore a tailored cream dress, her blonde hair shorter now, framing a face he'd know anywhere. It was her. Emily. The same Emily he'd left with a curt text, now transformed, her posture radiating strength, her voice filling the hall with crystalline clarity. Emily spoke on investment strategies, her tone firm yet warm, as if addressing each listener personally. She shared her journey, from a waitress studying finance at night to support her sick mother, to a single mom turning obstacles into opportunities. The audience was captivated, but James barely heard her words. He saw the spark in her eyes, the same one that drew him years ago, now deepened by maturity that humbled him. Her every gesture, every measured pause, reminded him of what he'd lost. The applause erupted as she finished, and James clapped too, his hands shaking, his chest tight with awe and regret. He had to see her up close to understand how she'd become this woman. As the crowd dispersed for a break, James headed backstage, his heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the chatter. He found her near a support table, sorting papers, her face still glowing from her speech. But what stopped him cold, as if the floor had vanished, was the girl beside her. A child, maybe 6, with wavy blonde hair and blue eyes, held Emily's hand while sketching in a notebook. The girl's smile was unmistakable. It was his smile, the same one he saw in old family photos, the same jawline, the same playful glint. James's breath caught. This was his daughter, no doubt. Emily looked up, and time froze. Recognition flashed in her blue eyes, widening briefly before hardening, as if a wall had risen. "James," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper, heavy with an emotion he couldn't pass. Anger, pain, shock, maybe all three. He tried to speak, but words tangled in his throat, choked by the weight of the truth hitting him. The girl, oblivious to the tension, glanced at him curiously, her pencil pausing. "Mummy, who's this man?" she asked, her voice sweet, slicing the silence like a blade. Emily faltered, her fingers tightening on the notebook. "No one, Lily," she said, her tone steady, but with a faint tremor. "Just someone Mummy knew a long time ago." She knelt, kissing the girl's forehead, and handed her to an assistant who took her to the event's kids area. Alone now, Emily crossed her arms, her gaze locked on James, daring him to speak first. "Emily, He started, his voice hoarse, but she cut him off. "No," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. "You don't get to show up like this after everything." Her perfume, now refined with notes of magnolia and amber, hit him, dragging up memories he wasn't ready to face. He wanted to step closer, touch her hand, but the gap between them felt unbridgeable. "I didn't know," he murmured, his eyes on the floor, Lily's image burning in his mind. "I didn't know you. We..." Emily let out a bitter laugh, a sound that didn't match the woman he remembered. "You didn't know because you didn't want to, James. You made your choice. A text. That's all you thought I deserved." Each word was a blow, and he felt their weight like stones. He wanted to explain, to tell her about his family's pressure, the nights he almost replied to her texts, but the words rang hollow even to him. "She's my daughter, isn't she?" he asked, his voice barely audible, his eyes searching hers for the confirmation he already knew. Emily was silent for a long moment, her lips pressed tight, as if wrestling with a storm inside. "Yes," she said at last, the word falling like a verdict. "Lily is your daughter, but she's my life, and you have no idea what it took to raise her alone." James felt the ground shake beneath him. He'd imagined many scenarios returning to the US, but none included this. A daughter, a girl who carried his features, his story, and he knew nothing of her. The weight of lost time crushed him. Every year he spent building an empire while Emily faced the world alone. He wanted to say something, anything, but her gaze froze him. It was a look of pain, strength, and a wound that might never heal. "I want to know her," he said, his voice breaking, laced with a plea he'd never felt before. "Please, Emily. I know I messed up, but..." I tried calling you so many times, but I couldn't find the courage to speak. It happened over and over. I never forgot you, but I thought you'd moved on." "You don't get to decide that now," she snapped, her voice firm, her eyes glistening with tears she refused to shed. "You had 6 years to be part of this. 6 years, James. And now you show up thinking you can just walk into our lives?" She stepped back, needing distance to shield herself. "I need to think. Not for me, but for Lily. She doesn't deserve to be hurt." James nodded, his chest tight, knowing he had no right to demand anything. He watched her walk away, her posture rigid but her shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying the weight of a past he'd helped create. As she vanished behind the curtains, a memory hit him. Emily's laugh that night at the Overlook, the promise he'd made to never leave her. He'd broken that vow, and now, seeing the daughter he didn't know, he felt the emptiness of all he'd lost. But as he stood there, frozen, a small figure darted backstage, notebook in hand. Lily stopped in front of him, her blue eyes bright with curiosity. "Are you Mummy's friend?" she asked, her voice sweet but with a hint of suspicion that stopped his heart. Before he could answer, the assistant called her, but Lily's gaze lingered, as if she sensed he was more than a stranger. The air backstage still hummed with the echo of applause, but for James the world had quieted, save for the frantic beat of his heart. Lily's question, "Are you Mummy's friend?" rang in his mind, as sweet as it was shattering, while the assistant led her away. Her gaze, with features that mirrored his own, was a window to a past he'd lost. He stood rooted, the scent of Emily's magnolia and amber perfume lingering, mixed with the crushing weight of guilt. Emily had gone, her silhouette swallowed by the curtains, but her words, "You don't decide that now," is cut like knives. He knew he couldn't let this moment slip away. Not again. Days dragged like years. James returned to his parents' penthouse, Atlanta's skyline stretching beyond the windows, but everything felt faded. He replayed every word, every glance from Emily, every feature of Lily. She was his daughter, and he hadn't been there. Not for her, not for Emily. The memory of that text from 6 years ago, cold, final, haunted him. He'd told himself he was being practical, that a romance would derail his future. Now, staring at the sterile luxury of his suite, he saw the truth. He'd been a coward. Determined to face his past, James spent days trying to reach Emily, but she didn't respond. A colleague mentioned she owned a diner downtown, the same one where it all began, where he'd sit in a booth pretending to read, just to watch her smile. Fate, with its cruel irony, pulled him back to the start. That afternoon, the sky was heavy with clouds promising rain. James stepped into the diner, the bell above the door jangling, hitting him with a wave of nostalgia so strong he nearly staggered. The smell of fresh coffee and warm pie filled the air. The place had changed, sleeker with polished wooden tables and walls lined with photos of smiling patrons. Emily had turned this humble spot into something warm, a reflection of her resilience. He saw her behind the counter, talking to a staff member, her smile professional but not reaching her eyes. When she spotted him, the smile vanished, replaced by wariness. "James," she said, her voice steady but with a slight shake. "What are you doing here?" "I had to see you," he replied, his hands restless in his coat pockets. "Please, Emily, I just want to talk." She paused, her blue eyes searching his face for a trap. After a moment, she nodded to the employee and gestured to a back table away from prying eyes. They sat, the silence between them thick, almost suffocating. The sound of rain starting outside tapped the windows like a metronome to a conversation they both dreaded. "Emily, James began, his voice rough, but she raised a hand, stopping him. "No, James, I go first." She took a deep breath, her fingers laced tightly on the table, nails digging into her skin. "Do you have any idea what it was like? Getting that text? Like I was nothing? Like everything we had was disposable?" Her words carried years of pain, each one a weight she'd borne alone. "I was alone, James, pregnant with a sick mother, working until I could barely stand. And you just disappeared." He looked down, a lump in his throat. The rain's patter seemed to amplify her pain, each drop a reminder of his choices. "I know I screwed up," he said, barely above a whisper. "I thought I was doing the right thing. My family. They pushed me. Said I had to focus on the company, that a relationship here would hold me back. I thought I was sparing you, Emily. That long distance would be unfair. Unfair? She gave a hollow laugh. Unfair was leaving me without a word. Unfair was finding out I was pregnant and being too scared to tell you, thinking you'd accuse me of trapping you. Unfair was raising Lily alone while you built your perfect life up there. Her words hit like punches, striking places he couldn't defend. He pulled his phone from his bag, hesitating before unlocking it and opening a folder of unsent emails. I wrote to you, he admitted, his voice shaking. Dozens of times. Messages I never sent. I wanted to apologize, to explain, but I didn't have the guts. I knew I didn't deserve your forgiveness. He turned the screen to her, showing drafts from years ago, words of regret, longing, a love he couldn't express. Emily glanced at the phone, her eyes scanning the lines, and for a moment, her face softened. But the pain returned, like a tide. Words, James. Just words. You could have called, could have come back, but you chose silence. She wiped a stray tear, angry at her own vulnerability. I rebuilt my life. Lily is my reason for living. And now you show up wanting what? To be the dad she never had? I want to know her, he said, his eyes wet, his voice raw with pleading. I want to be part of her life, Emily. I can't undo the past, but please, give me a chance to be something to her. And to you. He paused, his heart bare. I never loved anyone after you. No one. You and those weeks. They were the only times I felt alive. Emily closed her eyes, his words stirring something she'd tried to bury. The coffee's aroma, the rain's rhythm, the table's rough grain under her fingers, everything heightened the turmoil in her chest. She wanted to hate him, to send him away, but the sincerity in his eyes, so different from the cold man who left her, made her waver. And there was Lily. Did her daughter deserve to know her father? Did she deserve a chance at one, even this late? I don't trust you, she said at last, her voice low but firm. Not after everything. But Lily, she's curious, smart. She asks about her dad, and I never knew what to say. Maybe she deserves to meet you, but it'll be my way, James, slow, and if you hurt her, if you do anything to make her sad, I swear you'll regret it. James nodded, relief and guilt nearly choking him. I promise, Emily. I won't let her down. Or you. He wanted to touch her hand, but held back, respecting her boundaries. The rain outside fell harder, a silver curtain sealing their fragile moment. In the days that followed, Emily arranged their first meeting. She chose a park, a neutral space where Lily could feel at ease. James arrived early, palms sweaty, clutching a storybook he'd bought to win her over. When Emily and Lily appeared, the girl running with a red ribbon in her hair, James's heart stopped. She was perfect, a blend of Emily and him, her smile brightening the cloudy day. Emily stood nearby, arms crossed like a shield, watching. Hi, Lily, James said, kneeling to her level. I'm James, a friend of your mommy's. Lily tilted her head, her blue eyes studying him. Did you bring a present? She asked, eyeing the book, and James laughed, relieved by her childlike curiosity. I did. It's a book of adventures. Want me to read you a story? He glanced at Emily for approval, and she nodded, her face neutral but her eyes vigilant. As James read, his voice soft, spinning tales of pirates and treasures, Emily watched from a distance, her heart torn. Lily's giggle, so like James's, was a reminder of what might have been, but it also hinted at hope, at something new. She wanted to believe he'd changed, but the past scars still ached. When Lily ran to the playground, James approached Emily, hesitant. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion, for letting me be here. It's not for you, she replied, her tone firm but softer. It's for her. She paused, watching Lily slide down a slide, laughing. But you need to prove it, James. Not with words, with actions. He nodded, the weight of responsibility like a chain on his shoulders. He knew the road would be long, but for the first time, it felt worth traveling. As he watched Lily, an idea formed, something to show Emily he was serious, that he'd change everything. But before he could speak, Lily ran back, holding a daisy she'd plucked from the grass. "Look, Mommy, this is for you," she said, handing it to Emily. Then, shyly, she picked a smaller one and held it out to James. "And this is for you." James took the flower, its yellow petals bright against the grey day, and felt his eyes sting. It was a tiny gesture, but to him, it was everything. As he tucked it into his pocket, he glanced at Emily, who looked away, but not before he saw a tear glisten. What was she thinking? And what did Lily's small act mean for the future he so desperately wanted to build? The daisy, so simple and impulsive, echoed in his chest, warming him in a way he hadn't felt in years. The past's weight still hung between them, but the flower in James's hand felt like a fragile thread, tying him to the future he longed to create. He knew every step would be a fight, but for the first time he felt it was worth fighting for. James stayed in Atlanta, delaying his return to New York indefinitely. The choice stunned his mother, Catherine, who bombarded him with calls demanding answers. He ignored them, her voice a faint buzz compared to the stronger pull guiding him. Lily. Emily, true to her word, allowed gradual meetings, always under her watchful eye, in places where Lily felt safe and joyful. Parks, bookstores, ice cream shops, each became a stage for James to discover the daughter he'd never known. Lily, with her 6 years, was a burst of curiosity, asking everything from, "Why do birds sing?" to, "Have you ever seen a real pirate ship?" Her laughter, so like his own, was a balm but also a reminder of time lost. One sunny afternoon in the same park where Lily gave him the daisy, James found her drawing with chalk on the pavement, colourful lines forming a lopsided rainbow. Emily sat on a nearby bench, her gaze less guarded than before. James crouched beside Lily, the scent of fresh grass in the air. "What are you drawing, Lily?" he asked, his voice gentle, still learning to navigate this new ground. "It's our house," she said, pointing to a square with a chimney puffing pink smoke. "Here's where Mommy makes pie, and here's where Grandma Margaret reads stories." She paused, her green chalk hovering, and looked at him seriously. "Do you live in a place like this?" James's heart clenched. He thought of his hotel suite, his stark New York apartment, the sterile offices filling his days. "No, but I'd love to have a house like that," he said, his voice thick. "Maybe you can show me how it's done." Lily grinned, her blue eyes sparkling, and handed him a blue chalk. "You draw the sun, then. But it's gotta be huge." He laughed, taking the chalk, and for the first time in years, felt a lightness not born of deals or wins. As he drew the sun, his clumsy lines making Lily giggle, he glanced at Emily. She watched, her lips twitching into a half-smile that vanished quickly, as if she feared giving in to the moment. Meanwhile, James knew rebuilding with Emily would be trickier. He didn't push, didn't press, but showed up consistently. He brought her coffee at the diner, remembering her love for a cappuccino with a dash of cinnamon. He left short notes. "Thanks for letting me know, Lily," or "You're amazing at what you do." He wanted her to see his change, not the James who fled responsibility, but a man who'd learned from his mistakes. Emily kept her distance, polite but guarded, a wall he didn't yet know how to climb. One evening at a pizza joint Lily picked, the air rich with basil and melted cheese, James noticed a shift in Emily. She laughed at Lily's joke about the pizza looking like a wonky heart. The sound, light, real, stirring memories of the Overlook, of starry nights. He wanted to speak but held back, knowing every word had to be careful. Instead, he focused on Lily, who spun tales about school with an energy that lit up the place. Emily watched, and for a moment their eyes met. Something flickered there, not just distrust, but he didn't dare name it. The turning point came unexpectedly, at a barbecue hosted by Emily's friends at a farm outside Atlanta. The air was hot, thick with the smell of charcoal and grilling ribs, laughter and country music filling the space. Lily ran with other kids, her red ribbon bouncing as she played tag. Emily, more at ease than usual, chatted with a friend, a glass of lemonade in hand, her sundress swaying in the breeze. James, invited at Lily's insistence, felt out of place but was pulled into every game by the girl, as if she wanted to show everyone he belonged. Then it happened. Lily, thrilled with a rib she'd swiped from the grill, ran to James, laughing. "Look, it's almost bigger than me," she teased, taking a huge bite. Her face changed, eyes wide, hands at her throat. She choked. Time slowed, the music and chatter fading to a hum. Emily across the lawn dropped her glass, shards scattering as she sprinted to her daughter, panic on her face. James acted on instinct. He scooped Lily up, his heart pounding, and performed the Heimlich with a precision he didn't know he had. "Easy, kiddo. You're okay," he whispered, his voice shaking as he pressed carefully. After agonizing seconds, Lily coughed, the piece of meat falling to the grass, and she gasped, tears following. James held her, trembling with relief, as Emily reached them, collapsing beside them, her hands framing Lily's face. "You okay, sweetheart?" Emily asked, her voice cracking, pulling Lily close. The girl nodded, still crying, safe in her mother's arms. Emily looked at James, her eyes wet, but with something more, gratitude, vulnerability, maybe something she wasn't ready to name. "Thank you," she whispered, the word nearly lost in the breeze. James nodded, his chest tight, unable to speak. He saw the fear in Emily's eyes, the same fear he felt, and knew they were bound by something bigger than the past. Lily, still clinging to her mum, looked at him and mumbled, "You saved me." The simplicity hit him like a wave, and his eyes burned. That night, back at Emily's apartment, she let him inside for the first time. Lily was asleep, worn out, and the house was quiet save for a ticking clock in the living room. Emily made tea, the chamomile scent filling the air, and they sat on the couch, the distance between them smaller but still there. "I saw you today," she said, her voice soft, fingers gripping the warm mug. "Not the James who left me. Someone different. Someone who cares." "I always cared, Emily," he said, his voice rough, "but I didn't know how to show it. Not then. Now, all I want is to be the dad Lily deserves. And if you'll let me, something to you too." Emily looked away, her fingers tracing the mug's rim, the tea's steam a veil between them. Her heart raced, the past scars pulsing, but something new stirred, something that scared her. The man before her wasn't the reckless boy who abandoned her. He was flawed, yes, but his eyes held a sincerity she couldn't dismiss, and he'd saved her daughter. That act, more than words, spoke volumes. "I don't know if I can trust you," she admitted, her voice a whisper. "But I saw how you looked at Lily today, how she looked at you. Maybe we can try. For her." James's heart leapt, a fragile hope blooming. He wanted to promise the world, but knew words weren't enough. He nodded, the silence less heavy, more open to possibility. As he left, the tea scent lingering, he glanced back at Emily in the doorway, her eyes on him. For the first time, he wondered if the love he felt years ago still lived in her heart, and if he could rekindle it. He walked through Atlanta's dark streets, streetlights glinting off puddles from recent rain, and for the first time in years, felt a hope that wasn't fleeting. Emily had said they could try for Lily, but he sensed more. A delicate thread he didn't dare name, warming his chest like the sun Lily drew in chalk. The months that followed were a careful dance of rebuilding. Emily, still wary, let James orbit her life, allowing him closer to Lily in small moments that grew into something bigger. He drove Lily to school, the car radio playing pop songs she sang off-key, making him laugh. They visited the aquarium, Lily pointing at sharks with wide eyes, asking if James had ever fought a sea monster. Each moment was a brick in the bridge he built to earn his daughter's trust. The sticky sweetness of ice cream clung to their hands after park afternoons, and her laughter echoed in his mind on lonely hotel nights. With Emily, progress was slower, more fragile. James knew his love for her never faded, but the scars he'd left ran deep. He didn't push but showed his change through actions. He brought daisies to the diner, not the lavish orchids his family would choose, but simple flowers like Lily's park picks. He attended Emily's seminars sitting in the back, clapping with quiet pride she pretended not to see. One night, after a dinner where Lily demanded they make waffles together, the kitchen filled with vanilla and butter's warm scent. Emily began inviting him to closer moments, a Sunday brunch with Margaret, who despite her frailty beamed as Lily danced around James. The clatter of pots, the steam of fresh biscuits, Margaret's laughter at old stories, created a sense of home James had never known. He realized with a pang this was what he'd always wanted, even when he fled to New York. The real test came with his family. Catherine, who'd scoffed at James's decision to stay in Atlanta, demanded a meeting. He faced her in a sleek Harper Enterprises boardroom, the air conditioning chilling the heated tension. "You're throwing away your future for a woman who will never fit our world," she said, her voice sharp, hands folded on the mahogany table. James inhaled, the weight of Lily's dried daisy in his pocket, kept as a talisman. "She is my world, Mom," he said, his voice steady, unwavering for the first time. "And Lily too. I won't repeat past mistakes. If you can't accept them, you don't accept me." The silence was heavy, but to his shock, Catherine relented. Maybe it was the resolve in his eyes or the mention of Lily, her granddaughter she hadn't met. She agreed to meet them, and James felt the ground steady, as if fate was finally on his side. The meeting with the Harpers was a milestone. Catherine, with other relatives, hosted Emily and Lily at their coastal estate, a place of white walls and gardens scented with jasmine. Emily arrived hand in hand with Lily, her navy dress simple against the Harpers' elegance, but her presence magnetic. Lily's charm won them over, racing through the gardens and coaxing Catherine to pick flowers. The matriarch, initially stiff, laughed, holding a messy bouquet, her icy gaze softening. "You've got your father's spirit," she told the girl, and James, watching from afar, felt his heart swell. Emily held her own, speaking with the Harpers with the poise of her seminars. When Catherine praised her journey, Emily smiled humbly. "I did what I had to, now I do it for love." The words hung in the air, and James, hearing them, felt a lump in his throat. He knew she meant Lily, but hoped he was part of that love too. Slowly, Emily let her guard down. She and James shared more than Lily's moments. They walked at night, shoes clicking on pavement, crickets chirping, talking about the past, present, and, cautiously, the future. One night, at the same overlook where they'd kissed years ago, stars above, James took her hand. "I know I don't deserve you," he said, his voice rough, the breeze ruffling his hair, "but I want to spend my life proving I can be worthy of you and Lily." Emily met his gaze, her blue eyes shining under moonlight, and didn't look away. "I'm scared too," she confessed, her voice trembling. "But I never stopped loving you. Even when I hated you, you were here." She touched her chest, tears falling, a shy smile breaking through. They kissed, the salt of tears blending with the moment's sweetness, and the world seemed to align at last. Their wedding came months later, a quiet ceremony in a chapel framed by dogwoods, the air sweet with their bloom. Lily, in a white dress with a red ribbon, walked ahead of Emily, tossing petals with glee that made everyone laugh. Emily, in a simple lace gown, walked arm in arm with Margaret, who, though frail, glowed with pride. James stood at the altar, heart racing, eyes wet as he saw his family, his true family, united. During the vows, James, voice breaking, pulled out the daisy Lily gave him, now encased in resin on a chain. "This was our daughter's first gift," he said, looking at Emily and Lily in the front row, smiling. "Today, I promise to cherish every moment with you, like I kept this flower. You're my home." He fastened the chain around Emily's neck, who laughed and cried as Lily ran to hug them, her giggle filling the chapel. The reception unfolded under the stars, tables draped in white, violins weaving through guests' laughter. Lily danced among the adults, pulling Catherine to the floor, while Emily and James swayed close, their warmth erasing past shadows. "I love you," Emily whispered, and James knew he'd found what he'd always sought. As the night ended, fireworks bursting above, Lily ran to them, holding a drawing. "Look, it's our family," she said, showing a house with 3 stick figures hand in hand, a big sun overhead. Emily and James exchanged a look, their eyes bright with joyful tears, knowing they'd built something greater than any empire, a home. Did you love the story? Drop a like and subscribe to support the channel. Thanks, and see you next time.